Good evening and welcome to Talking Songs with me, Rowland Jones. Here we are again. It's Tuesday. It's 6:30. Well, it's not really because I'm recording this beforehand. This is the first time we've recorded something beforehand for this show. The main reason being the fact that my guest today actually lives in Australia, so the time difference made it a little bit tricky. So we thought the only thing we could do was record it. So we shall be going over to a pre-recorded Fiona in a short while. But in the meantime, I'll just play you a quick tune. This is a song. Yes, this is a song. This is a song I wrote for my wife called Since I Found You. Now birds swim in the ocean and fish fly in the sky. Algebras don't seem so hard and the deserts ain't too dry. Dogs don't chase the cats no more and cats are talking to mice. Even the people I hated before seem incredibly nice since I found you. Yes, since I found you. I never get a speeding fine, always find a parking space. And I wake up on a Monday morning with a smile upon my face. I never liked my boss before, I thought he was a jerk. He just gave me more money, we had a drink after work. Since I found you. Since I found you. And when we have a barbecue, I don't get smoke in my eyes. And when I'm in the kitchen, my omelets always rise. If my toast fell to the floor, it would fall the right way up. I could pour my coffee blindfold, it would still land in the cup. Since I found you. Since I found you. Every film has a happy ending, the postman doesn't knock. Superman likes the buddies and like to see in the dark. The world is turned upside down, that all seems strange to me. Politicians seem sincere and banks give money for free. Since I found you. Since I found you. When we go out walking, it never seems to rain. And even if I'm leisurely, I always catch the train. Cause there ain't no reason to hurry, ain't no reason to fret. I haven't won the lottery, it hasn't happened yet. But I found you. I found you. I found you. I found you. So, that's a little song called I Found You, dedicated to my wife. And now we shall go over to Fiona Boyes. From Australia, indeed. Yes, a long way away in the warm sunshine. Fiona Boyes, how are you, Fiona?
I'm very good. How are you today, Rowland?
Well, yes, struggling under the continuing lockdown here and trying to be optimistic about things, but battling on. So, Fiona Boyes and the Blues, where did it all start?
Well, look, the funny thing is, I think you probably heard blues before you knew what it was, because there's so much blues in popular music embedded in there. But for me, the mother lode was really getting to college, and I very quickly found a club on campus, which was the Folk and Blues Club, and the president at the time was a harmonica player guitarist who was a big fan of early blues, and he introduced me to a lot of documentary recordings, some of those classic vinyl albums like Paul Oliver's History of the Blues Volume 1 and 2, that sort of stuff. And I just loved it. It was like I felt like there'd been a piece of my life that was missing that had suddenly dropped into place, and I became a big blues fan.
Excellent. So what at that point, were you actually already playing an instrument, or did that send you to play an instrument?
Well, I had played an instrument as a kid. I certainly came from a family that valued music, but I played, the last instrument I'd played in early high school had been clarinet.
Oh, right. Okay.
which, and I look back at that and think, if I had somehow, if I had been in New Orleans, I probably would have stayed playing clarinet. But at the time, I think it was one of those sort of things where, although I could play to a reasonable standard for a beginner, I couldn't play without sheet music, and I was learning formal lessons, and I think that kind of ultimately became quite frustrating. And also, I think there was also that thing that happens for a lot of young women, hopefully not these days, where in teenagehood you become curiously passive and follow boys around while they. So for me, it wasn't until I became a blues fan in my sort of around about sort of 17, 18, but didn't really start playing until I was about 26.
Oh, right, okay.
So I'm a self-taught guitarist that came to the party a little bit. Certainly, I was conscious of being a long way behind my male peers who, obviously been playing since their teens.
It's interesting what you say about the whole thing about, like, you're saying that when you played clarinet, you were reasonably accomplished on it, but only if you had dots in front of you.
Yeah.
And I mean, my immediate thought, because I was the same. I had piano lessons and all that sort of stuff, and then one night somebody showed me 8 chords on a guitar, and I thought, that's it. But there's the old joke about how do you get a guitarist to turn down, and that's show him the dots. But I think it's a different way of thinking as well, because you think chordally.
Yeah.
And it takes you in a different direction, and you're more likely to end up, I think, as a guitar player, to look at actually writing songs as well.
Well, the guitar is such a ubiquitous instrument, but it's
Absolutely.
also foundational to so many wildly diverse styles of music.
Yeah.
When someone even says, I want to learn to play guitar, what does that mean? Do you want to play classical? Do you want to play rock? Do you want to shred? Do you want to play flamenco? But it can be, I think, why it's important is it can be as simple or as complicated as you want it to be.
Absolutely.
But for me, personally, the idea of not having music and, blues, of course, being, often a style of music that has, been dominated by self-taught, idiosyncratic players, where it's about feel and about learning by ear and from mentors.
Absolutely, yeah. I don't know if you've ever experienced it. When we were in Mississippi 3 or 4 years ago, I met somebody there, a guy who was, his father was actually a well-established blues guy, but he was in a museum, and he was sitting there with a couple of guitars, and I said, okay, let's do something. And he played blues very much in what I would consider like the traditional style. He didn't actually do it as a 12-bar blues.
Yeah.
He changed to the next chord when he'd finished the line.
Yes.
You know, and there was no structure to it in the conventional sense that I grew up, playing, really.
Yeah.
And it was quite off-putting to begin with, but I really enjoyed it, because I realized I was actually just, I couldn't be on autopilot. I just had to listen to what he was doing. And it was quite fascinating.
Yes, you just had a very typical Mississippi lesson, I think, right there. And for me, that was, I think, certainly as a player, I started out with acoustic country blues, very influenced by that folk revival blues like Mississippi John Hurt.
Yeah.
And there was a very important player in the Melbourne blues scene where I grew up, a guy called Dutch Tilders, and he played his own material, but he was a fantastic finger picker, and he played a lot of Big Bill Broonzy material as well.
Right.
And I remember having fallen in love with blues and hearing this stuff on, bootleg cassettes and vinyl records and things.
Yeah.
he was the first guy that I actually saw playing in a small club where it was like up close, seeing a real musician playing that sort of stuff. And, it was like, wow, that if I could do that, that would be fantastic.
It's
But it
one of
the finger
it's one of one of those things that I always treasure, but I wish I could remember more about it now. Is that we, like yourself, Folk Blues Club, we had one in Swansea where I grew up, and we had quite a lot of big names who came to the club. Big in those sort of terms, people like Reverend Gary Davis.
Oh wow!
And I actually saw Mississippi Fred McDowell.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking now that, and I would have been, 16 at the time, I suppose, 15, 16, just being sat in a room, this far away from this guy playing this stuff. And I'm thinking, I wish I could recall the whole thing now, because although I enjoyed it at the time, I didn't treasure it like I should have done, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Oh, yes. So, okay, play us a tune.
Well, having just evoked some of the greats, there's this is actually a song that I guess is a little bit more outside of that usual 12-bar thing, and it's inspired by Mississippi blues. And I started my journey as a songwriter and as a player with that more ragtime acoustic stuff, and I thought I would never be able to tackle that more muscular groove-based stuff. And this song is a tribute song to some of the players who've passed, who've either been mentors or I've actually met or have had a real importance to me in my blues journey. So we'll see how we go. We'll call in the blues gods now. Well, it's late at night, I'm walking the floor. I'm thinking about the people that have gone before. The blues is for the living, but all the same, the dead ain't gone if you call their name. The dead ain't gone if you call their name. Sometimes I feel so blue. I'm thinking about the people that I once knew. What is the soul of a woman, Lord? What is the soul of a man? All I know is I'm keeping the faith, people, just the best that I can. I'm gonna call their name. I'm gonna call their name. Now I see you, but someone in my dreams sometimes. He's smoking and joking with good old pine. Willie Big Eye Smith is there. James Cotton too. They're telling me what we all gotta do. We gotta call their name. We gotta call their name. Well, I never saw Memphis Minnie, but I heard her records play. In heaven, Dutch Tildes is dueling with Jessie May. What is the soul of a woman? What is the soul of a man? All I know is I'm keeping the people, just the best that I can. I'm gonna call their name. gotta make another dollar, you gotta make another day. But I feel spirits move every time I play. What is the soul of a woman? What is the soul of a man? All I know is we're keeping the faith, just the best that we can. We're gonna call their name. We're gonna call their name.
Great. Love it. Love it. Great. Lots muscular guitar. Love it. So when you so that's when it all started, when you started going to this club and sort of felt at home with the blues. So when did you start actually writing songs, do you think? Can you put it down to a specific point?
Yeah, well, it was quite some time later. It was I started first. My entry into performing and playing was pretty early on in the piece. I was pretty shameless. I'd only been playing for about 18 months, and I went into an open mic night at a coffee shop, and I borrowed a guitar. Actually, I didn't own a guitar at that point, and unbeknownst to me, the coffee shop was having a competition, and they invited me back. They said, "Oh, you've won tonight," and I said, "What? I had no idea."
You won a competition you hadn't even entered. That's great.
They were choosing someone from 8 or 10 weeks, and that's actually how I got my first guitar. So that was my first Maiden from my hometown of Melbourne, Australia, and so I then had a guitar of my own, and I started playing at the coffee shop, and not that long afterwards, I had an opportunity to join a band, and that was a bunch of women in the blues scene in Melbourne, and we knew each other from going to gigs a lot, and we all realised that we had fledgling abilities on different instruments. So we formed a band, and I borrowed an electric guitar because I thought, well, I'll need an electric guitar for a band, but I had no idea what to do with that. And so I guess that band we were playing mostly kind of country blues and swing kind of covers. And after a while, probably a few years into that, so I would say probably by the early 90s into that sort of was when we started writing. Different band members started writing, and then it was sort of evolving more into me becoming more of the main songwriter and the vocalist in that band. Now, since I've just recently re-released my first solo album, which was done under my own name, which was originally recorded and released in 2000. I thought it would be a nice kind of synchronicity to have a 20-year anniversary in 2020.
Right,
which
nice.
Actually, was something that I had kind of planned to do, but as it turned out, the beginning of the lockdown meant that was the perfect opportunity for me to work on that project. And I spent the first 4 to 6 weeks going through a pile of junk, boxes I dragged around literally for 20 years, and creating 24-page liner note memoirs about
Okay, nice.
that stuff, and that was really the beginning. Like there's 16 tracks on that album, and I think there's 6 covers and the rest are originals. So that was really the beginning of doing more songwriting, and now, you know, the bulk of my recorded body of work and even my gigs, it would be mostly original material.
Is it the thing about the blues? I mean, traditionally, I don't know how to say it. The thing about writing the blues. I mean, I always remember a wonderful interview with Chris Rea on Radio 4 once, where somebody said to him, "Is it what do you feel about this idea that you know, white people can't sing the blues?" And Chris Rea, in his eloquent manner, said that's bollocks. But there's an interesting thing that I mean, I was listening to somebody. Was it Gary Clark? Is he called? Dobro player, young guy. But the song he was singing, which was a modern song, was very much set in that sort of 1920s vein. And it's, I mean, how do you feel about writing blues? Because I mean, I think it's a perfectly valid thing to do, whether you set it in as a contemporary piece of music or in the back, you know, way back then. How do you approach it?
One of the things that I've been very passionate about is the range of styles of blues, and I find that really interesting. And that's been a real source of inspiration for my songwriting, increasingly so over the last decade or so, I would say. You know, I started out writing songs very much in the ragtime and acoustic country blues tradition.
Right.
And I wasn't thinking too much about that as such. You know, I just knew that this was music that I loved and resonated for me. And I think that's something that, like a lot of roots music, you know, it might not be mainstream anywhere, but there's something about it that speaks to the human condition, and people respond to that. And I think a lot of Americans are often surprised at how a musical form which began so uniquely as an American art form has gone on to become globalized and universally loved. And I think it's because of that connection to the human condition.
Yeah, something that's essentially human. Yeah, no, I understand that. Yeah.
And the other thing, because I didn't think about this too much until recently, I had to, over the years, because I do a lot of original material, I was invited to teach fingerpicking guitar at Augusta Heritage Week in West Virginia many years ago. And then they said, well, look, we have a lot of people interested in songwriting, but perhaps you could do a songwriting course as well over the week. And I said yes, just to get the gig. A course.
Ever the practical, yes, I love it.
Yeah, isn't that just like a musician? Yeah, yes, I'll get the gig. But it made me think about this, and over the years, not very often, but I have done seminars and presentations about songwriting, particularly in the blues tradition, and I keep coming back to my first trip to America in 2003, and I set out on a pilgrimage to find Memphis Minnie's grave.
Right.
Clearly, you know, there wasn't books to guide you in those days. There's a lot of books now which can get you to some of those historic places. But at the time, I was just really conscious that there were so few role models for a girl with a guitar. And Minnie, you know, was the female player of her generation, and also a very important guitarist and songwriter. But on her headstone, there's an incredible, wonderful inscription. I believe that Bonnie Raitt raised the headstone. And I'm paraphrasing now, but it says something along the lines of, the hundreds of sides that Minnie recorded are the perfect material to teach us about the blues, because we will hear her dreams, her fantasies, her desires, but we will hear them as if they are our own. And I think that is just such a wonderful idea, because it speaks to the idea that if you simplify something, and blues often needs to be very simple in the lyrics, if you simplify something to an essence, you can take something that's very personal, a very personal story, but you can render it universal so that other people can relate to it.
Yeah, because the theme is generic in a sense, because you've extracted that bit out. Yeah, I go along with that. Yeah, one of the things that I always intrigued me, an interview with Robert Cray, where he was saying that somebody had asked him a similar sort of question. They were saying, well, you're a successful man, you've sold zillions of records, you happily married, family man, blah 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 blah. How can you be singing the blues? And he said, well, I've got an alter ego. And he's going to have this alter ego, and he's the one who suffers, basically. But there is a universality to it, if that doesn't sound too pretentious, which I would go along with. One of the things that I do find, though, I don't know how you feel about this, but there is a sort of there's also a sort of a grammatical thing of American music and the blues in particular, where if I write a line, I'm more likely to say ain't than isn't.
Yes. Yeah, and, absolutely. Yeah.
Because that's what it's about. And if I am going to include a car name in it, it's going to be a Cadillac, not a Ford Cortina. So. And you get drawn into that, and I think that's fair enough, because if I was going to write opera, I'd probably write it in Italian if I could. So,
in fact, just in the last couple of days, I had a lengthy interview and conversation about just that. It's like, how come you don't sing with an Australian accent, or why is that? And I said, well, exactly that. I think if you're going to write in any style of music, whatever it is, whether it's pop, rock, death metal, you're not going to be a successful songwriter in that style unless you immerse yourself in that music. And when you listen to a lot of one particular style of music, and become immersed in the sounds of it, then the use of blues language, for example, is a marker that you're writing within the genre. Because if you're writing in a traditional style, you should be respectful of the signpost that says this is a blues.
It's inevitable in a sense, isn't it? Because if you've liked that, the first things that you're going to play are going to be from that. So you're going to be already, sort of molding yourself into that. So it is inevitable, isn't it? Oh, good. Yeah. We're glad we're singing from the same hymn sheet on that one, definitely.
Exactly. So if you were a huge fan of opera, then the first thing you would be doing is learning German and Italian and aspiring to sound like the greats of that genre.
Yeah, absolutely.
Good. But I think I would add, particularly in the blues, that the added exciting tension, particularly as a songwriter, is that you are trying to be respectful of the traditions while still trying to find your own voice in the music.
Yeah, definitely.
A lot of people who say, you play blues. Oh, I tried that once. I got bored. And you think, how? There's all this. How did? But that idea that blues is samey or derivative, or and the same could be said of other roots music, folk and country. But I think in its best expression, each generation and each player finds their own voice within it, and reinvents it.
I agree with it. I mean, and I think the thing is to say, it can be boring. Well, I think anything can be boring if it's all the same. Whether it's experimental jazz or opera or whatever. If you're listening to lots of pieces which are all the same, then yes, it's going to get boring. But and I think it's one of those problematic areas in music, is that we all strive to classify things, because people say, oh, you play guitar. Well, yeah, what sort of stuff do you play? And you have to answer it. And you don't want to say, well, I just do my own thing, because that doesn't make any sense. That doesn't help anybody. But, and then I've talked to lots of people, and they say things like, well, yeah, I play blues, but it's more country really, and it's got a bit of jazz. That's fine. Because I don't think there's, it's not clear cut. Where blues ends and soul music starts is pretty grey area, really. And where funk slides into it, and where New Orleans comes into it, and yet and yet in all those things, there's a huge element of just comes from the blues, full stop. You know, so it can't be boring.
What you're saying there has been part of my inspiration, as I said, particularly over, well, my latest electric release, Voodoo in the Shadows, is a classic example. It's like a blues road trip because there's elements of gospel and Louisiana blues and New Orleans, and there's even like a tango-y kind of, it's like you started off in Mississippi and then you went down through Louisiana and then you caught a road,
heading south.
And to me, that, you know, certainly my songwriting and my recorded output has included inspiration and elements of all those things, of New Orleans and swing and rockabilly and soul. And to me, it's just like good stuff. And sometimes it can be, because there are all these wonderful regional styles of blues, that it's sometimes interesting where the genre boundaries slightly blur. Is fun. I've done recent things which I love, that kind of that. Oh, I'm out of tunes. Like that Louisiana style blues where you have all this kind of little nod to the double stops of the fiddles and like that. You know, it's a wonderful inspiration, and it's a very different style across the board. You know, it's.
I'm just trying to think. I heard a fantastic song from a band which I wasn't aware of a while ago. I think is it called the Steel Drivers, where they've got like a there's a double bass player and a cellist and a fiddle player, and it was I can't even remember what the song, but it was a very, very traditional. I think they call it Steel Drivers. And it was absolutely awesome. But I thought, how you can't categorize that with say, well, the blues is boring, because it was just extraordinary. I mean, personally, I'm a big fan of people like who are sort of going into the people like Leon Redbone. I thought was a wonderful performer, and then the other person I really love is Dan Hicks. Western swing stuff, you know, which is just absolutely gorgeous. But there's big chunks of this sort of overlaps. Marvelous. Okay, do us another song.
Well, I might just hop onto the acoustic, and seeing we're talking about the beginnings. You know, a lot of my stuff on acoustic is all about finger picking, and this one actually doesn't have a lot of fancy finger picking, but I'm going back now and I'm having to remember this because this was actually on the album that I recorded 20 years ago.
Cool.
And I guess I thought to play this one because it demonstrates an aspect of blues songwriting, or a tradition in blues of signifying, which is kind of taking something a bit problematic and talking about it, just slightly disguising it. This particular song is a song called My Say So. And it's about someone at the time who was talking about me a lot, giving me a lot of advice, some of it solicited and some of it unsolicited. The wonderful thing about this is the idea of signifying is to actually write a song, and the person, this song is about a person who was actually at the gig. She heard me play it, but had no idea it was about them. This is
right.
The point.
Okay. Extraction.
The signifying idea is you can speak to power or you can speak to something, and like all my bandmates knew who it was about, but the person involved didn't. Okay, so
what a subterfuge! Marvelous.
And that's a little bit of blues signifying, and it's called if it were my say so, you keep your full mouth shut. You keep your mouth shut, man. If it were my say so, you keep your opinions to yourself. You couldn't shut it if you were dead. I feel like slapping you upside your head. You keep your fool mouth shut if it were my say so. If it were my say so. Get a rusty razor, I'd run you round. I'd run you all round town. If it were my say so. Busy come that smiling to a frown. Now when they put you in the ground, you'll still be talking as they let you down. You keep your fool mouth shut if it were my say so. Yeah, shut it, man. All right. Oh, I'll tell him now. If it were my say so, you'd set yourself down, you'd think a while. You'd stop and think what you've been saying round town. It ain't no wonder folks get riled, oh man, cause they don't like your style. Cause you keep putting your big fat nose smack dab where it ought not go. You keep your fool mouth shut for my say so. Yeah, you keep your mouth shut if it were up to me. Yeah, shut it, man.
Brilliant. Louis Jordan immediately sprang to mind.
Well, yeah.
I think was it you run your mouth and I'll run my business, brother?
Now, we see this is something too that I think the blues has got going for it, because in that hokum tradition, you can have a lot of fun with lyrics and perhaps write stuff that you couldn't write in other genres of music. And so, you know, I've got quite a lot of material. I tend to alternate between acoustic projects and electric projects with my albums. Okay. But, you know, some of the acoustic stuff, I've got songs like I'm Going to Drink to Your Health and Shall I Ruin My Own? Hokum.
That's very Louis Jordan A and B thing, isn't it? That's lovely.
And, you know, Two-Legged Dog, which, you know, so you get you can have a lot of fun with double entendre and single entendre sometimes.
Yeah. Well, again, was it Dan Hicks' song? How can I miss you when you won't go away? I think that's. I love all that stuff. And there's another one that sprang to mind as you said that. Anyway, I think it's great because and also there's the thing you're saying about like sort of switching the direction of the song, in the sense that I think it was Alan Lomax who had this he came to the conclusion that a lot of the things that were written about by the early blues songwriters, when they wrote about, you know, bad relationships with women, what they're actually talking about was a bad relationship with their boss, but they couldn't actually do that because that would get him fired or, you know, beaten up or hung or whatever. So it was a way of redirecting the anger in a different way. But that's interesting.
Saying something that, you know, someone important might not understand, but all your peers and the audience feels empowered and understand what it's about, you know.
Yeah, it's an in-joke, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, and I think that's and you know, there's, you know, clearly you don't want to necessarily take things literally and incite violence, but you know, that song, looking back on that, you know, there's a lot of blues language in that, like that crops up in a lot of traditional blues songs, like I'm going to get a rusty razor and run you all over town, and all that sort of stuff. But still, even though it has those, the use of the language has the nod to that tradition, it is also telling the story. As I said, my bandmates knew.
Absolutely,
that's.
I can just see them smiling to each other on stage, thinking there's somebody out there who doesn't know this is about them.
Yeah. Pretty much.
That's brilliant. No, I like that. I love the idea. It's quite interesting. But as soon as you started singing that, I was thinking about, well, you know, the Louis Jordan stuff. Again, lots of humor in the lyrics, not just in what's being said, but the way in which it's being said, those sort of opposing couplets and things like that. It's clever stuff. It's lovely. So you were saying just then you tend to alternate between acoustic and electric with your projects. Is that a sort of conscious decision to alternate them, or does it just happen as you go along?
It seems to have evolved that way over the last certainly 4 releases. And then I used to always keep my acoustic repertoire and my electric repertoire separate. And sometimes as I was writing a song, I would have a sense that this would be a song that would be good for finger picking. So I'm consciously going to put that into the acoustic bag, and then I'm this would be great with a wider palette of instruments, and would be great as a soul blues or something with the band. And currently I'm blessed with a wonderful just 2 bandmates, a drummer who's also a wonderful hand percussionist, and a Hammond organ player who also plays bass and saxophone.
Hammond organ.
So
Love it.
For example, the latest electric album, Voodoo in the Shadows, has got some wonderful piano and Hammond on it, and percussion, and so it's a very the Hammond trio is a very flexible format, so we can go from washboard, electric bass, and cigar box through to something that's really full drum kit, Hammond, and something that's really from really down home to really uptown. But what I started finding about 5 albums ago, I did the first one that had a bit of acoustic and a bit of electric on the one project. And I think that was when I was realizing more and more that the song is the important thing. And if a song is a good song, it should stand up. So even if it had been written with the band in mind, because increasingly, particularly with a lot of my international touring, it's just it's much more economically feasible for just me to travel by myself. So I'm doing a lot more solo shows these days, and so I always need to think about how I can present. If I'm promoting an album and I'm on the road by myself, then how can I effectively play these songs, whether I'm solo or with a band? So then things just all started. It was great, sort of coalesced into, the boundaries between acoustic and electric got more.
I think it's the point about the boundaries between them is again from one of my reasons for wanting to do this whole project from the outset is that I have this sort of idea that a song that is well constructed will function in many different ways. I mean, a classic example would be With a Little Help from My Friends, which is where the Beatles did it, and where Joe Cocker did it. Entirely different song, effectively. But more importantly, I think there's a huge element of the music industry which is pushing us away from that. There was a documentary on BBC I was listening to early on last week, and it was the title was Songwriting, but it was talking to people who were writing for the big hits, the big streaming hits, right? And they were saying that the average person who listens to Spotify will flick after 5 seconds to the next track. So the entire structure of the song was based around what can we get into the first 4 or 5 seconds that will draw people in. So first of all, they would structure the song so that the chorus was at the beginning, or the hook line was at the beginning. No long introductions, minimal instrumentation. It was a recipe, and it was extraordinary to listen to. And then it was to contrast with that, at the very end of it, there was a traditional style songwriter, and he said there's all these angst-ridden, struggling, heartbroken people at home with a guitar in their bedrooms who can't and don't want to do that sort of thing. But it did sort of, show how the industry, for want of a better phrase, is divided into different things. Because again, as I say, the whole point about this is that everybody who's come on it has sat down like yourself with a guitar, or a few people have done it with a keyboard and just sang a song and that's it, and that's all it requires to get the song over. What you do with it after is entirely up to you. You can take it away, you can play it with a band. I can take it away and put it with a big band arrangement, whatever, but if the song works, the song works. And I think
that sounds like it is probably true, that recipe for how to make a Spotify hit, but it's so soulless, isn't it?
Absolutely.
I'm such a Luddite. I prefer to that old school idea of the album as a body of work. I really I construct my albums. I like each album to have its own particular flavor, and it's and I agonize about the track order.
Okay, I'll ask you a question here that I've asked a lot of people this question, and I can almost guarantee I know what your reply will be. Have you ever used the shuffle button on a CD player?
No.
Exactly. I rest my case. I'm exactly the same. When I first got, I remember buying the first CD player I bought in 1984, whatever it was, 83, and thinking, what the hell is that? Why would I want to do that? Somebody spent a lot of time constructing this album that goes in this order, so it has peaks and troughs, it has a flow to it, it has a plan to it. Why should I shuffle them around?
Yeah. I mean, that's not to say that I don't have favorite albums where I just adore everything apart from that one track and I'll skip it.
Yeah.
that's too. Yeah. But I think that notion of having a sustained attention span and the idea of having, hopefully, from the first track right through the album, you're aiming to take your listeners on a journey with you somewhere. So that's important. And I also, in respect of repudiating and downloading and the digital world, which I'm finally having to embrace.
Well, we're doing it digitally now, I'm afraid.
We're using it for good, not evil.
Yes, not for the good of evil.
I like the packaging too. I find I really enjoy good artwork, and I really enjoy good information and liner notes on an album. I like to be able to listen to the music for the first time and read something that gives me some context about what was happening for the artist and how they're creating it, or where they're coming from, or something. It's great.
Yeah. I'm just going to go off camera for a second here to show you something. Hang on a sec. I don't normally do this when I'm on air, but this is a very important album.
Mm-hmm. Oh yes, John Mayall and the Blues Breakers with Eric.
This is the original one I bought in 1967. Mm-hmm. This is actually a mono version.
Mm-hmm. Glorious,
which is glorious mono, yes, and it's still there. It's still framed on the wall. Right. Yes, I have a CD version of it as well, but I still have the original. But the thing about it is, I can remember buying it.
Yeah.
But one of the other things for me is also that I think that, and I've posited this theory on many occasions. I think people say, "Oh, yeah, music's all around you these days." And I say, "Yeah, you hear a lot of music, but do you actually listen to it?"
Yeah.
And I think that there's a lot of that. There's a presence of music which isn't necessarily appreciated. I mean, I remember some years ago, the wonderful George Melly was on Radio 4, and they were talking to somebody. It was on BBC, and they had George Melly there and somebody from the Muzak Corporation, and this guy had done a bit of research, and because Melly was doing this huge campaign about anti-Muzak. And this guy had done a bit of research, and he said, "Well, George, we play a lot of your favorite music. We play a lot of Bessie Smith. We play a lot of this. We play a lot of that." And there was a pause, and the guy obviously thought he'd won this argument. And George Melly said, "Yes, it's all wonderful music, and I love it, but I'd like to choose when I want to listen to it. Thank you." And that was the end of the conversation. I thought, yes, absolutely. That's how it should be. Yeah. So we're agreed on that. Then albums should be structured.
I think it's important. It's actually quite amusing in many ways that, if you really care about what you're doing, and certainly for me, the way I would be songwriting, and I would then think about how to record an album, and I do like to record quickly and mostly live, because I think that's blues very well. I think that idea of layering things can sort of stultify a bit, and that for a lot of roots music, the idea of trying to just grab a performance gives it an and an organic nature to the music, which serves blues well.
Yeah.
So what you're aiming to do is to think about your material and work on that. But when you hit the studio, play and record for 2 or 3 days, and just get the performances down, mostly live, and then structure the artwork and the album. But you put all this time and effort and money. Then you get it beautifully mastered and package it, and then everybody compresses it to really poor quality MP3s and listen on a download through earbuds that are not great. So
it's terrifying, isn't it? I mean, one of the things that I had this conversation with somebody a while ago who was a sound engineer who had been in the business for donkey's years. And he told me something which I didn't realize before, that when they were mastered, because in fact we were talking about this specific album, and he was saying that that the albums from that era, the mono ones were done by the producer and the engineer, but the stereo ones were done by the assistant, because nobody bought stereo albums at that period. So which is why a lot of them were so remastered some years later. But the other thing he was saying was that the way in which vinyl is actually transferred to the vinyl means that, I can't remember which way around it is, that the outside tracks will handle more bass than the inner tracks. So that actually the mastering process for vinyl is even more complex, because it depends on where the track appears in the physical master.
Fantastic. Well, I actually was really pleased, because I love vinyl. I still have vinyl. So I kept my vinyl, even though I don't listen to it much, these at the moment. But I was really thrilled to see Voodoo in the Shadows. The first time that I pressed my own vinyl for an album that I own and I'd made, and it's only available here in Australia. But I just went, okay, I'm doing this as a noble experiment. I'm just going to press 200. They're all signed and numbered, but I did. I got a separate master done for the vinyl, and I got DMM metal stamping, and I was really pleased, because most of my recent albums are either in one case recorded, but in the rest of the cases distributed and released in America, worldwide, through a Californian label called Reference Recordings. And they're wonderful folks, and they're not, it's not a blues label as such, they're an audiophile label, and they were really pleased. And they went, "This is great." And I went, "Well, these people have audiophile sensibilities." So that was a
nice
confirming for my first noble experiment into
brilliant
into producing vinyl. Yeah, great.
Excellent. Well, whilst we're talking about technology, let's head for different sorts of technology. Let's head back for the cigar box, I think. What do you reckon?
So here we go. This is we'll just maybe check to see if it's in tune. Yes, let's go from uptown to very down home now. And my recent albums have featured my burgeoning collection of crazy instruments. This is the latest recorded edition. I also have a 4-string, a 6-string. This is a 3-string. It's called the Salty Dog. It's made by a guitarist in. Just have to find the one thing about having an electric instrument is you've got to plug it in.
It helps.
And it's made by a guy called Steve Plater in a little town in Victoria, Australia called Ballarat.
Right. How do you tune it? Is it written just for 3 strings?
Well, this, as I said, this is the 3-string. The nature of these instruments is that they're made out of what's to hand. That's the ethos of them.
Yeah.
And so each time you get one, it's almost like it's a whole new relationship. You have to find out what it likes and what it doesn't like. So all my cigar boxes are tuned generally one like a root note and a fifth.
All right.
So this one is in D.
Right.
So this one's in D, but I have a beautiful 4-string lap one, which is very high action. I might show you in a minute, which is tuned to B flat because that's just the resonance of the cigar box.
Yeah. No, I get that. Yeah.
My 6-string is usually tuned more like a standard bottleneck open G.
Right. Okay. Cool.
So this one is D-A-D. If you'd like to play along at home. Song that's inspired, it's not in her style, but it's inspired by the great Mississippi guitarist Jessie Mae Hemphill, with a little bit of her attitude. I'll tell you a bit more about her later and the background of the song, but it's on Voodoo in the Shadows, and it's called Tell Your Story Walkin'. Bit of attitude. Yeah, you can tell your story walking very well on your way. Yeah, you can tell your story walking very well on your way. Think you remain mistreated no matter what you say. Yeah, tell your story walking, I won't pay you no mind. Yeah, you can tell your story walking, I won't pay you no mind. One day you look for kindness, no kindness will be fine. Tell your story now. Now when we get to Beulah Land, there won't be no rich or poor. Now when we get to Beulah Land, there won't be no rich or poor. And all I know is if you get there, man, you'll fit the mighty soul. Now I can't change you, and I don't wish you ill. Yeah, I can't change you, man, and I don't wish you ill. Well, a long time, baby, think you've been walking still. Yeah, tell your story walking very well on your way. Well, you can tell your story walking very well on your way. Think you're a mean mistreated no matter what you say. Think you're a mean mistreated no matter what you say.
Lovely sound. Oh, I do like that a lot. Very much, very much. Interesting that. So it's root and fifth. Interesting.
Yeah. So and I know other people who tune their cigar boxes differently, but all of mine pretty much are tuned like that. I'll just quickly grab the 4-stringer just to give you a quick look.
Go on.
Actually, I'll grab a couple here. At the moment, as I said, these strange instruments are sort of proliferating around my house.
They're breeding.
They are breeding. This is the 4-string,
Right.
and this is the main guy who's built cigar boxes for me. The first two I got is a guy called Shane Soul in a little town called Yakandanda. Say that 3 times quickly. After a couple of bourbons, Yakandanda, and it's got very high action.
Yeah.
And so it's basically a lump of wood. It's got 2 bolts, and because it's got such high action, you just have to commit to playing it completely.
Yeah.
And I use a little whiskey bottle as a makeshift.
Right. Okay.
That's a technique up in Mississippi. So that's that features on several of the albums. And this one, my husband, the preacher, just built this for me, and I
saw this on the website. Yeah.
So this is it's tuned in C, but again, it's like a C. Actually, at the moment, it's in a strange tuning. It doesn't have the bass note on the bottom, so it's F C F C.
Okay.
And it's a tenor style cigar box. So what I ended up doing with that is we called it the tenor, and I painted a little folk art. There's an Australian $10 bill on the back.
Excellent.
And so that too is a very Mississippi thing. These kind of handcrafted, hand painted, folk art.
Lovely. Oh, wonderful stuff. Well, Fiona, I have to say it's been a delight talking to you. Fantastic. Thanks for joining us. Now, if people want to find out more about you, I've got you here as FionaBoyes.com. Is that correct?
That's absolutely correct. You can find me, drop me a line. I'd love to hear from you.
And what should we be listening out for? What's your next release when's that going to be, do you think?
I've been writing, speaking of songwriting, I've been busy songwriting in this lockdown, and I've also done a few virtual jams with my lockdown distant band members.
Yeah.
So you can see a couple of those new collaborations on my YouTube channel. I've, of course, busy promoting the Blues in My Heart 20th anniversary re-release, which is the acoustic album that I was speaking of earlier. So that was released just in November last year. And I also have got a new digital release, which was a live recording in Atlanta, which is the first time I've attempted to release something on my own account in the digital world. So, and so that's called Live in Atlanta. But I'm not sure when the next physical album, when I'll be able to, record properly. But at the moment, still, I've got a couple of new releases out and songwriting in hand. So
you're busy.
I'm busy promoting I'm busy loving the ones I've got right now.
Good. That's brilliant. Well, thanks for joining us. Yeah. And I shall see you again soon. So look after yourself and take care. Stay safe. Okay. Bye for now. That's wonderful. That was Fiona Boyes. What a great performer. Lovely lady. Good music too. So that's all for me for this edition of Talking Songs. So until next week, stay safe. Bye.